Every day, it seems I experience some scene or situation that requires so much love to resolve. Not judgment, not rejection, not anger, not separation, not violence, just love. The world is asking me to become an expert on true love. To deeply understand and embody true, pure love. Knowing what it is and what it is not. True, pure love is not conditional. It will not demand certain conditions be met in order for it to be expressed. There are no strings attached to true, pure love. I know what it is not, but do I know what it is? Can I go inside and open up the heart of true pure love? If it is unconditional with no conditions, that true pure love must be deeper than the ocean. That anything can be thrown at it and it will simply absorb, accommodate, merge, remain undisturbed. The heart becoming like an ocean, deep and mature. I used to think a loving heart was so emotional, so passionate. But in fact, it's broad and serene, powerful form of peace or silence that can hold anything and everything, however extreme, in such a peaceful way. A peace that soothes and heals and nourishes. Very calm heart is a loving one. Om Shanti. Om Shanti. Warm welcome to this interview with Raj Yogi. Apologize for everything, basically. And our topic today is part 2 of the difference between love and attachment. So if you have anything you want to contribute to the conversation, you want to explore, definitely let us know. Just type in the chat box and we're happy to incorporate that into the conversation.
Bring it closer so they can hear. Om Shanti. Good evening and welcome. Thank you for your patience. We just had a little bit of some technical issues and we didn't know we were already live. So there was a inspiration to continue with last week's topic, and I actually managed to remember some of the questions. And some other things came up as well this week. What I noticed, at least today, I really couldn't separate love and detachment, in terms of my experiments. So that was actually quite relevant to the commentary as well. But just addressing some of the things that we had discussed last week, and I was using the example of a mother. And what does that look like in terms of attachment versus love? And so a question I had wanted to ask is, what would that look like if it was real love? I feel that, a part of what we were discussing, that there's a fear that means that I'm not caring towards my child, or what does that mean to be unconditional? But that key piece you were sharing quite a bit last week about being beyond seemed to be an important part of that.
Sorry. I think when souls hear the term detachment, they think it's a closing or shrinking of the heart. But in fact, in the case or example of the mother, to envision that the feelings the mother has for their child, they now have for every child. So rather than closing the heart, detachment is about expanding the heart. That's what unconditional means. So you don't need to be my child for you to have those feelings of love. So all we're doing is separating the words my and love, detaching those two words. So all that remains is love. So when we say detached and loving, removing the my, which is conditional and quite frankly an illusion, and just keeping the love. So it's an expanding of the heart.
We had this conversation last week about, actually, it was on Sunday, about having love for the self, being a mother towards the self. So that was where I was reflecting as well on, because perhaps maybe we're just thinking about these physical situations, but I was thinking about to be able to see my mistakes, my weaknesses, in the way that you're talking about. And what has that been for your experience, your challenges, your insights, your progress?
So what I think is suggested in Raj Yoga is that the relationship one has with themselves internally, which we work on with the Supreme Soul, will deeply color the relationship we have with everything else, with others and with matter. So we want to kind of experiment on the self, and we start to see that we definitely have conditional love for the self and even dysfunctional love for the self. So conditional might come across as being very harsh on the self. Dysfunctional is I'm very liberal with the self. So I'm allowing myself to get away with some pretty harmful things. So both sides of the coin might be happening. So on one side, being very harsh, I want to inject a lot of understanding. A lot of understanding. I want to really never feel the value of the self is connected to what I'm doing. I of course want to reform what I'm doing so it's aligned with what is benevolent. But in terms of, say, mistakes, as I'm learning how to become a benevolent or loving being, I want it to be a non-violent path. So I need to learn to correct myself without violence. That's one side. So in terms of dysfunction, letting myself get away with a lot of things, which some mothers do with their children. Obviously, here I need to start to have a healthy relationship between love and discipline. So some things I need to experiment with on the self.
It's interesting. I know it was within the last couple of hours, but oh yes, one of the seniors in the study was sharing about that there's some who are not able to take the knowledge that we learn in the study and have loving feelings towards the self, and therefore not able to towards others. So something came up as well during the reflection, the commentary, that there seems also a connection between love and silence, and was reflecting quite a bit on that as well today. And yet our ideas of silence, you hear the silent treatment, and yet in nursing, at least I know that there's something called giving your presence. It's a big thing in terms of having the kind of silence where patients actually feel your care. So it's quite interesting that there's some spiritual aspects about that. But the connection between detachment, silence, and love in terms of how I can see myself, or even in the situation with the mother and child.
As we move along, I think we start to discover that it's not so much the love we need to figure out. It seems we've got that pretty covered. It's the detachment we need to figure out. So the love becomes more and more unlimited and what we call a power. So yes, everyone has love, but what's going to give that love that power so it's unconditional? And this detaching from things that are limiting. So when we look at silence, it's part of understanding detachment in a more accurate way. So again, with the self, I'm detaching from ways of dealing with the self that actually don't create any progress. So we talked last week about finishing the sentence. What am I detaching from? But in terms, ironically, again, we have a very confusing relationship with silence, which is very connected to detachment. That in atmosphere is connected with two things: healing and learning. Hospitals and libraries, we like silence. So on some level, we understand that silence is connected to being able to learn or heal. And on other levels, we seem to have connected with something cold and uncaring. So that's something we have to resolve inside. But in terms of, I think, deep down knowing that silence is connected to healing, learning, absorbing, and uplifting, we know that we are detached from something that blocks or limits. That's what silence means. That something that's very productive is being liberated. So we often even connect detached with freedom or liberation. So it's a real re-education on this word, getting a very pure, actually a loving understanding of detachment.
It's so interesting for us to seemingly feel like we're veering off topic, but we're not. In terms of detachment with respect to love versus attachment, Do you feel that there's, in your experience in this study, I'm not sure if, for lack of a better phrase, like different levels of detachment in terms of, we identify with this body and to let go of that identification. But then I identify with certain roles and certain maybe ideas and certain values. Would you say that there's like different levels, or how does that work in terms of assessing my progress or my depth of experiencing the truth?
So in the study, we use the words gross and subtle. So the gross is the easiest. It's a bit like when you're cleaning the house. We sort of start on the gross level. We put things in drawers and cupboards. And then by the end, we always joke, we've got the Q-tips out and we're cleaning,
And then we open the door.
Yeah. So this letting go can go from a very gross to subtle level. And that's, I guess, the benefit of scenes in the drama. If I can receive them in a loving way, that is appreciating or recognizing they're trying to reveal something to me, drama will always let me know to what depth I have become free by what affects me or disturbs me. So it can be very, very subtle what we are still attached to, and therefore it will be blocking our loving or merciful response.
Do you feel that, this attitude that we have, I don't have time for spirituality, or freedom is very conditional, I won't be able to feel peace unless this happens, that happens, understandably, but that doesn't allow us to really be able to feel a sense of, maybe call it space or some distance or freedom in the midst of when, let's say, a storm comes, where you don't really have, or in terms of mistakes, you don't really have any other place, so to speak, to stand in terms of your sense of identity, when that all those things that you've identified, whether it's the actions that now created a sense of, oh, I made a mistake, or certain thoughts going on inside, or emotions, that this concept, I don't have time, or I won't be able to feel this unless this happens. But there was a time I remember you've shared, maybe it was from your own experience, that it's possible in the midst of all that upheaval to actually feel something else inside. I think that's quite fascinating.
So minimally, we have a split personality disorder as we continue on this spiritual path. So the example we often use is the actor in a play. And I've always wondered, I remember talking to an actor who has become a student of Raj Yoga, and then reflecting on the profession of acting and what happens inside an actor to be able to do that, because it's a very odd situation. So I'm an actor in a play, and I might be playing on the stage, might be playing a part that's horrific or sad or depressed. So, and really, it's convincing. The audience is watching me and they're moved, and I'm deeply emanating an emotional state. But internally, I'm thinking about what to have for dinner. So it's this weird kind of thing where I'm living in two states. So also in Raj Yoga, we are like actors who developed amnesia and became completely engrossed or engulfed in our part, the costume, what the costume dictated. And we're slowly awakening to detaching from that. The actor inside who has incredible capacities off stage. While that's going on, it's going to feel as if two things are firing as the amnesia goes in and out. Two things are firing at the same time. The pull of the part is still very strong because it's a deep habit. And then this little flame of awareness or reality, we're trying to breathe life into that through silence and connection to the Supreme, So they're both kind of firing. So I can still see the part having a lot of power, melodrama, but then there's also this piece of me we call detached observer that's watching that happen. Both are going on at the same time. It's a really strange feeling, but that's what transition looks like. It's not overnight. It's not, this complete jump. It would be lovely if it was, but it's this journey.
I know we're overboard, but we were quite late because of the technical issues. So, in terms of that piece, I feel like the thought is flying away, but now I'm remembering just the relationship between that practice of being a detached observer. Have you found for yourself the quality of that, the more meaningful it feels, the more enjoyable it is, the more real it feels, like you feel like you're separate from, the role, like you feel like you're not identifying with the body, that you feel that you're actually a living being of consciousness, that when these other things are firing, that there is a meaningful experience that's not really you, that without that, does a knowledge still have enough power?
I think it is that last word, this accumulation of power, which detachment actually is a lot of power. So people go to see actors in a play, go to see a performance to be entertained. So as my power accumulates, and I'm not devaluing or anything, but I will watch this melodrama inside myself and be more and more light or entertained about it as I'm accumulating the power of knowledge. So there's knowledge, there's knowing something, but the power always means I'm able to override. So when we talk about, say, fitness training, someone's lifting a heavy weight, they have the power or strength to do it. The weight is heavy because of gravity. On the moon, it would weigh nothing. It is because of gravity. So what I'm actually overcoming is the pull of gravity, that gravitational pull. I have the power to override the pull of gravity, the strength. So similarly, they make it look so light. I watch these powerful souls lifting things and I'm like, it's like a feather, and then I go to lift it. It's going nowhere. So also internally, to remain very light or entertained by my own melodrama, right? My own melodramatic. And it's not to, again, take lightly or devalue. I wouldn't suggest that, but I'm developing a different relationship, a stronger relationship with truth, where the power of it's actually becoming reality, not just ideas, but an actual world, an actual reality that has power.
Sometimes you might have heard of this. I feel that many have probably experienced this, where suddenly their behavior takes a turn and they react in a certain way. And they're like, yeah, it was as if I watched a little part of me. I became angry or something happened and I felt like there was just a little part of me watching. Is that sort of, just touching what that realm is, but because of who we really are as souls, that there is really clearly a separation, but we're just catching a glimpse of it.
Yeah, the power of truth is building in the soul, so that particular sanskara, detached observer, just keeps getting stronger and stronger. So I might touch it, that it feels like I'm having, and I think it's a real breakthrough when there is that reactivity or mistakes, and I have a different relationship, response, experience towards it. That is a breakthrough moment. It might seem like a very small thing, but it's a sign that the power of truth is accumulating inside of me. And now I'm in a different state to move forward.
Sneaking in one last question. I'm referring to those who haven't even taken Raj Yoga. I've heard that it was quite common. If you have any thoughts about that, I've heard that often. Like it feels like as if something foreign came out, and if that's really just because of the nature of who we really are, and we just don't have any context to understand.
Definitely. I mean, this is why we have faith in the human spirit or in souls and each other. Is that it's not in Raj Yoga, it's not a place that we're receiving knowledge that suddenly creates this, it's not that I'm told I'm a soul and I suddenly become one. I've always been a soul, right? And we can have flashes or moments of that spiritual awareness. We just can't have mastery over it because we don't have the skills or the wisdom yet. So Raj Yoga is developing that mastery over spirituality, but everybody has the capacity to have flashes of these moments. It's just hit and miss. So developing a spiritual method, pathway so that it becomes a constant way of life.
Thank you to those online for your patience, and thank you, Julie, for your thoughts and experience. So perhaps we'll have a reflection.
I bring into my mind an image, whatever image is meaningful to me, of love. Might be a heart, it might be a fragrance, whatever is meaningful. And I imagine that image being placed in a jail, in bondage. It exists, but it is extremely suppressed, limited. And then I imagine that same image being freed, liberated, detached from that state of bondage, completely free to express. The bars on that jail are conditions, desires, attachment, arrogance, every tendency that emerges from not knowing the self, the deepest form of having no love for the self. The moment those bars are removed, the attachments, the arrogance, the judgment, the expectations, the insecurity, the moment those bars are removed with the key of self-awareness, I am a soul, a pure being, constantly filled with deep spiritual capacities, independent of what's going on around me. That key of self-awareness melts all the bars of the jail, and the heart becomes detached, free. Love is free, but it requires freedom, detachment, which is the power of truth. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. I find that we may need to be reminded again and again, detached from what, finishing that sentence. So just a reminder, we have the next Raja Yoga Foundations in English starting tomorrow. And so for those who actually live in Calgary, you can certainly join on site, but registration is required through the Calgary Center's website. For those online, it's also available. But again, registration is required. I think the last 2 hours of the session, you can still register. So it's tomorrow, 4 Wednesdays at 6:30 to 8 o'clock. Then we also have the Raja Yoga full course in Hindi taking place on July 8th and 9th, 15th and 16th. And so that is 2 weekends in the afternoon, 12 p.m. to 3:30. I'm sure there is a English workshop in there somewhere, but we encourage you to check the center's website for all of that information. Of course, all of these online drop-in sessions in English as well as Hindi online. Thank you for joining with us. Om Shanti.